podcast. I am Brandon, along with, as always, my co-host, my partner, Mr. Avi. What's up, Av? What's going on?
How we doing?
In my opinion, post-Royal Rumble week of wrestling was pretty dull.
Yeah, not much went on this week, so I actually had a good chance to I guess I'm going to reflect back. I'm not going to review the Rumble. If you want to listen to our review of the Rumble, you can actually listen to our last week's episode, and we'll take you through the entire Rumble piece by piece. The one thing that kind of stuck out for me was Drew winning. And I was thinking about it. You know, the rumor was they were going to go with Roman, then change it over to Drew at the last second. What I thought was interesting was this. You know, had Roman won it, it would have been like, okay, here we go, Roman again in the main event of WrestleMania. And Roman's kind of turning into, I guess, like the Buffalo Bills of wrestling at this point. You know, he's getting the spot. He's getting the spotlight. But let's be honest, he's coming up short in every facet of the game that you need to be the guy. So they go with Drew McIntyre. And I kind of feel like Drew's career from this point on can take two trajectories. I don't see him as being the guy, so to speak, as that, you know, mainstream crossover superstar type wrestler. I can see him as a champion. I can see him carrying the company. But like I said, I find that he's going to take two different trajectories. I could see him either A, taking trajectory one, which I hope he does, which is go to WrestleMania, win the belt, and have a nice, lengthy, old school face champion title reign where he takes on a different challenger every single month. I'd be fine with that. The other trajectory, which I have a feeling may wind up happening, is he goes down the trajectory of Sheamus, where he goes to WrestleMania, he wins the belt, holds it for a little bit, and then kind of falls off the radar. And the reason I'm saying that is because up until he won the Rumble, he really kind of fell off the radar if you think about it. You know, here's a guy that has the look, has the skill, has the in-ring presence. The fans are certainly behind him. He has everything you need to be a world champion. He has everything you need to carry a company. Like I said, I don't think he has the personality to have that mainstream crossover appeal. But who knows? Listen, who could have called The Rock and Hogan and Austin when they first started out? I think he's one of the greatest comeback stories in wrestling history as far as characters go. I mean, this guy came in hot, completely fell apart to the point where I think he was on Velocity for a while, gets released, goes to TNA, kind of reinvents himself, and then comes back and becomes hotter than ever. So it's a great story from that respect. Like I said, I see two trajectories with him. I see him either A, taking one where he becomes the champion, becomes the man, and is a big player for years to come, or B, turns to the next Sheamus.
I agree with you as far as him being that comeback story. This is, for him right now, this is Pulp Fiction and him, she's Tron Travolta. That's the comeback. I mean, he's been back on the main roster for almost 2 years now, and this is the first time he's in some sort of main event position. So I don't know if it's a Paul Heyman influence that he's in this position, if Vince finally saw something in him or decided that it's time to go with a different flavor. But I also totally understand and agree with what you're saying as far as he can either go this way or this way, and this way is the Sheamus way. And then we see him in a year in a tag team for the next 2 years after that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a couple of different ways it can go. I'm happy for the guy, to be honest with you. I think he's a great talent. I think his in-ring work is great. His look is great. You know, even on the mic, he's not that bad. You know, he's definitely got some work to do. I'm not going to call him the next Rock, but on the mic, he definitely is not bad at all. There's guys that are far worse than him. You know, listen, I hope he succeeds. Right now, WWE is in a place where, I mean, your highlight of the week this week, aside from, you know, the Edge and Orton angle, and we'll get to that in a minute, is, you know, Roman Reigns got his revenge by pouring dog food all over Baron Corbin. I mean...
Horrible. SmackDown is atrocious. I don't know what's going on with that show. I don't know if it's Bruce. I don't know if it's Fox. I don't know if it's Vince, but it seems that show gets worse and worse. I mean, I would have thought, I'm actually surprised by you, and I'm going to call you out. I'm surprised you didn't say your highlight of the week was Otis getting his date on Valentine's Day with Mandy.
Hey, listen, I see big things for Otis. Everyone's laughing at me. I'll be the one laughing one day when Otis is doing big things. But that being...
Otis is going to be the Shawn Michaels of that team, and I feel bad for Tucker because he's going to end up being released.
Otis future. If you look at Otis, if you actually break, I wasn't even going to get into Otis, but listen to Otis right now. If you actually break Otis down, who does not like a fat, happy guy? If you look at the annals of sports, right, from your Rex Ryan when he was coach of the Jets, all the way through to now, William Refrigerator Perry. Everyone likes a chubby, happy guy with a little bit of an attitude to go with it. Bill Parcells when he coached the Giants. Rex Ryan, like I said, with the Jets. There's just something, even now, Andy Reid with the Chiefs. There's something about a jolly fat guy being successful that gets people around him. Think about it. The guy he looks like Bash Booger. I mean, let's just break it down. What he comes down to, he looks like your typical 300-pound jobber from the 80s. That, Randy Savage would body slam and hit with an elbow from the top rope. But this guy is pulling it off, and people are starting to gravitate towards him. How could you not?
Could you see them actually making him almost the Chris Farley of WWE?
I mean, he's kind of headed there, I feel like, at this point. And the truth of the matter is, what this is doing for anybody the most is Mandy. Because now, Mandy is all of a sudden actually getting a crowd reaction, and she's actually turning into a face. Where if you think about it, if WWE does this the right way, this can benefit both the careers tremendously. Where you keep pushing Tucker as the jolly fat guy, the underdog, if you will, who gets a girl like Mandy Rose that nobody could see coming, so everybody's behind him on that respect. But let's say she does wind up with him. Now the crowd's going to be on her side for just being with this guy. So if anything, it actually helps both their careers if you think about it.
To me, what I'm seeing is happening is it's going to be kind of a triangle thing. I think that what's her face, the partner, is going to get jealous that Mandy and Otis are hitting it off, and I see Fire and Desire breaking up over this, and Mandy's going to get that push as the babyface.
Yeah, I can see that also. But the truth of the matter is, I mean, Mandy's going to get the babyface push. Otis is already getting the babyface push. The two people that are going to suffer the most are their partners.
Yep.
Those are your two Marty Jannettis right there. And it's a shame because, God, what is her name again?
Sonya Deville.
Sonya Deville. She can actually work a match. She's not bad in the ring. Her mic work is pretty good. I mean, I don't know if it completely derails her. I think if they do break up, maybe they put her on Raw, which would definitely help her out. Otis's part was a Tucker. He's got nothing after this. He's going to wind up, God knows doing what. He'll probably wind up in AEW, probably as a jobber by the time this whole thing is done with them.
Not even. He'll be an Impact. He won't even make it to AEW.
But I can tell you right now, this thing with Otis and Mandy, I think is beneficial for both their careers. Like I said, it gives Otis that babyface underdog push, which is rare because he's a big guy. So it's actually a big guy as your underdog kind of getting the push. And I think it's going to give Mandy a push as a fan favorite as far as that goes. And listen, I've always liked Mandy. I think she's getting better in the ring. And I think, this will definitely at least do something for her. That being said, though, back to SmackDown, I don't even know what's going on SmackDown. Honestly, it's a show where it doesn't feel like a wrestling show in the least bit. It's way too overproduced. Like, holy crap. I feel like every week I'm watching a pay-per-view. And I'm not talking about the match quality. I'm talking about the actual TV quality, the way they hype everything up. And you finish up with, a guy getting dog food dumped all over him.
The only thing I hope is that this is the end of Roman and Corbin, because I think we've seen it to death. It's like this has been going on for months, and it's like enough is enough. Move on.
I'm at the point now where what do you do with Corbin? Like, you've pushed this guy up, down, sideways, up our throats, up our ass. I mean, there's nothing you could do with this guy. The fans are never going to give in to Corbin. His work in the ring is average at very best. His mic work is annoying. His look is annoying. There's nothing redeemable about this character. Now, on the other hand, you could save his career because as bad as he is in the ring, I could see him as a manager.
As in the King character.
I could see him as a manager. I think he has something there, not so much in a wrestling role, but in a manager role. And I think there's a few guys you could look at, and if they do ever go back to the days of managers, that could work better as a manager. Listen, I'll give you another one. A guy who I think would be a good manager, to be quite honest with you, and I'm throwing it out there, Daniel Bryan.
I could see that at once he winds down. He definitely...
I'll tell you what, I think he needs to wind down now. And I'm going to go out on a limb right now and say something, and it just popped in my head, but I'm going to go with it. And you can fight me on this one. I think Daniel Bryan's going to go down as one of the most overrated ring workers in the history of the business.
For what reason do you say this?
Give me 5 great matches you ever had in WWE.
Yeah, but that's also this is the WWE curve we've talked about.
Right. I've seen his Ring of Honor stuff. I mean, honestly, give me 5 great matches.
We've discussed this last week. I can't give you 5 great matches in WWE because he hasn't had great matches.
Go back to the Ring of Honor days. Give me 5 great matches.
All right. I bow to you.
And any of our listeners wants to fight me, fight me. He's had good matches in Ring of Honor. He's had good matches. I can't think of one great match he was ever in. You know, a lot of his stuff from Ring of Honor I felt were good matches. They had a good pace to them. And now you're going to ask me, what do I consider a great match? I'm not going to go historical because times are different. But these days, what I would consider a great match, Cena and AJ Styles from Royal Rumble a couple of years ago. That to me was a great WWE match. If we're going to go New Japan, any of the Kenny Omega matches from New Japan, to be quite honest with you, I thought they were all great. You know, I look at Daniel Bryan's history. I look at his work rate. He's had good matches, but I can't think of any great matches he's ever had.
So you feel he's had more, it's been more on urban legend type name value than it's been in actual performance.
Yes. And you know what's funny? I'm starting to see a lot of that start to pop up now with some of the newer AEW fans about Omega. I'm starting to see people really question, you know, his work rate. And listen, the guy's a great worker. We've seen his stuff in New Japan, so I'll defend that, obviously. But they have a point. You know, in AEW, Omega hasn't had any really great matches so far. It's almost like he's neutered himself in a way, almost.
Do you think it's because of his title as in the corporate structure of AEW that he's held himself back, so he's not, you know, you don't get that Jeff Jarrett comparison that, you know, originally we thought Cody was going to have, but now Cody's, you know, now that Cody took himself out of that title picture situation, he's not going to Jarrett the title, if you will. But like Omega, like he's put himself into a tag team. I mean, we know where this angle is going with Hangman Page. You know, you could see it a mile away. I mean, maybe he just is holding back to let loose, to let Omega be Omega, or is it that Omega wasn't as good as we thought? It's just that Okada was.
That's something to consider also, because I'll be quite honest. You know, I'm looking at wrestling now as a whole, and I really, again, you know, I'm kind of winging it here, but you know, let's look at WWE right now, and we'll go Raw, for instance. Give me your great workers on Raw.
AJ Styles. What else is on Raw? Samoa Joe, Kevin Owens.
Okay, on SmackDown.
On SmackDown, I would still say Daniel Bryan's a great worker. I would say. I'm sorry?
You're saying a guy who's never had a great match is a great worker.
He's still a good worker.
I said great worker is a big difference.
All right. I don't even know I can't even think who's on SmackDown. That's how bad SmackDown is.
But the whole point I'm trying to bring up is the days of the great worker behind us. Because if you look in the history of the business, who are considered your best in-ring workers, right? HBK, Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, just to name 3, just off the top of my head, we'll go with those 3, right? Nobody right now could even compare to any of those 3. You know, and all 3 offered something different when it came to the in-ring excellence, so to speak. You know, Randy Savage, another one that comes to mind. Whereas, you know, Rick Steamboat played the perfect face, pulling out victory at the end. HBK was just like your smooth as can be technician. And then Bret Hart just, you know, did everything on the mat that was possible to make a match look good. And I kind of wonder if those guys, those qualities are even on the current rosters anymore. Like who are you? I really tried to think about it. Is there such a thing as a great worker at this point?
In WWE, I don't think you have the opportunity to be a great worker. I think because of that structure and the way that WWE puts things together, it's neutered the work, not the workers. It's neutered the talent to be great workers. I think if you take a guy who, seems okay in WWE and give him an opportunity on a stage like New Japan or maybe even AEW, I think you're going to see, much better things. I mean, is Moxley a great worker to you?
No, of course not.
I'm just thinking of guys who used to be there and now are there.
No, I would never call him great. I would say he's definitely he's good. I mean, he does what he has to do. I can't really call him great. But then, you bring up the guys who are great in the roster. We've already established Daniel Bryan's never had a great match. AJ Styles had some great matches in TNA and New Japan. Samoa Joe had some great matches in TNA. Kevin Owens, I've definitely seen have some great matches. All right, so yeah, WWE, the style definitely neuters you. But even good workers, like who are your good workers now that you know you're getting a good match out of no matter what happens?
I'm going to say Kofi. Kofi puts on good matches. I mean, if
he's had some duds. That's the thing.
Yeah, but
I feel like it's so inconsistent with the WWE guys. Like you just said, Daniel Bryan's a good worker. That match at the Rumble was nothing to rave about.
Right. That's the problem. Like you just said, the WWE guys, they get 20 minutes one week and then they got 30 seconds the next week. Its inconsistency to me is the perfect word to describe WWE. They are completely inconsistent in every aspect of what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, even if you look at Monday night, with the way Edge and Randy Orton kind of kicked off their feud. Great way to kick off a feud, and I can guarantee it's not going to live up to what it's supposed to live up to.
I thought that was a great angle. You saw it coming, but I still thought it was great.
Right, but we both know it's going to amount to nothing.
Yeah.
Well, I almost feel like Vince McMahon trolls WWE fans, and I'll tell you why. He does things that gets you guys so excited, and at the end of the day, the payoff amounts to shit.
When was the last time there was a great payoff to something WWE does? Maybe something during Attitude. Maybe Ruthless Aggression.
Cena.
Maybe Ruthless Aggression. Who knows? But yeah.
Probably when Punk won the belt off of Cena in Chicago. Man. It's I don't know. I mean, right now we're in kind of a dead state WWE-wise, if you think about it. I mean, from Royal Rumble through WrestleMania, you're not going to get much in February. March is where you'll start to get some play for WrestleMania at least. But it's interesting because there's really nothing on the horizon for WrestleMania so far, and things may change, that, really has me going like, okay, this is going to be a great WrestleMania. I mean, I think it's going to be a good WrestleMania. I think it has the potential to be good if they let things happen the way they were supposed to. I think Lesnar and Drew can be good. I wouldn't say great, but I'll say good. I mean, what's Bray? I guess Bray at WrestleMania is going with Roman.
Yeah, that's what they're saying. Let's see. From what I read, Charlotte's actually going to challenge Rhea Ripley for the NXT title.
I got an issue with that. I don't think Rhea Ripley is anywhere near ready for something like that.
I mean, but from the opposite end, at least it's somewhat of an original match. Otherwise, we're going to see Charlotte and Bayley for the 100th time.
Honestly, Rhea has a lot of missed spots. She's not ready for this kind of a situation.
And then we got we definitely don't want to see Charlotte and freaking Becky for the millionth time. Even Becky brought it up. I don't know if you saw that YouTube video after the Rumble. She's like, oh, Charlotte's going to challenge me. We're going to have our match for the 387th time. I mean, they're talking, Becky and Shayna, which will play off what happened at the end of Survivor Series.
Well, you know what it is also? I think you're in a point now in WWE that, and it's funny that I thought about this, that this was something that you and the rest of the IWC used to bitch and whine about to no end back around 2011 to 12 that there were no new stars. And if you look at Raw and SmackDown, you're getting kind of on the carousel lately, it feels like, where it's just, the same guys on top doing the same things, having the same spots, having the same feuds.
It is definitely merry-go-round, ring around the rosy in WWE land. I can't argue that with you.
That's where I kind of feel like a brand extension doesn't work. Where if you think about it, if you had this one giant roster on two different shows with one world champion, one U.S. champion. You could have an IC champion also. Why not? One tag champion, one women's champion. Now you got a lot more options. I feel like when you have a brand split, so to speak, it kind of dwindles down your options. And now what are you going to do? You're going to have WrestleMania. Then you're going to have another lottery shakeup.
Yep.
So you're basically
every year.
So you're basically telling us that every year moving forward, it's going to get really boring around this time, and then we're going to do a shakeup. So why bother watching wrestling throughout the entire year until the end of the year, basically?
I mean, that's what I think. They get a lot of people who leave. They're like seasonal. To me, WWE has a lot of seasonal fans. They'll watch from Rumble to Mania, and then they'll be gone for the following 8 months. So, and that's WWE's fault because they can't carry the fans over past WrestleMania because they know things are going to go down the tubes. Maybe people might pop up in the summer for SummerSlam because it's a big show, but otherwise WWE is just not holding the fan with their creative.
Even NXT, I mean, you're getting to a point now where things are getting a little repetitive at NXT, and what's going to happen with that is to maintain their unrepetitiveness, so to speak, they're going to push guys in the main rosters. Those guys are going to get better like they always do. They're going to bring up guys that really aren't ready yet. Like, honestly, Rhea Ripley, I don't think should be getting that spotlight right now. I don't think she's ready for this spotlight at all. Her matches are very sloppy at best. She misses a lot of spots. Her mic work is suspect. I have an issue with Rhea Ripley as champion right now, I'll be honest with you.
Well, it looks like they're moving Shayna up, so I guess that to them that was the best choice. And I'm gonna touch on NXT. I think NXT has decided, you know what? AEW was one. We're not gonna push hard anymore because ever since the new year, NXT shows have not been these fantastic shows.
Yeah, but you know what? I'll be honest with you. Let's just sit back for a second and think about this because it's just another, And I was thinking about this the other day when I was watching NXT. And no matter how you spin it, no matter what you do, Raw, SmackDown, NXT, you pretty much have the same rosters now for a while. How many different matches can you possibly have at NXT? What new refreshing thing can you have on NXT at this point?
Unless they introduce a new signee, a new character, it's basically the same thing as Raw and the same thing as SmackDown in that you have this wheel of the same characters, and it's basically like spin the wheel, make the deal. Let's spin the wheel and see who's facing who tonight.
You have Keith Lee, and you have and he's facing off against what's it called again? That one group,
Undisputed Era.
So it's Lee against the Undisputed Era. Ciampa and Gargano doing whatever they do, and everyone else kind of just falls into place somewhere else.
I mean, they're literally touching back, and this is something that really got to me this week watching NXT, which I thought was a boring show for the record.
It was very boring, to be honest with you.
You're going back to Keith Lee against Dominik Dijakovic, a match we've seen a couple of times.
At least a half dozen at this point. Yep.
You're going to Ciampa and Cole again, which I guess has a story because they're going with the whole Ciampa never lost the title stuff.
Okay,
so Ciampa wins the title, and they have another rematch WrestleMania weekend? I mean, we're just going to keep going around and around with that. The only original match they got going to me is Gargano and Finn Balor. And that's only because Finn hasn't been in NXT for a couple of years. But again, what are they going to kill that to death as well?
But that's what I feel like WWE does after a while. It's like they just kill things to death. And it's almost like they have no choice in the matter because what else are you going to do? At this point, the roster, I don't even know if it's overkill and it's almost like you're getting to a point now where how many incarnations of Kevin Owens, Samoa Joe, Seth Rollins, and Buddy Murphy and Aleister Black and AOP can you throw together on a weekly basis? That's where we're headed right now if you think about it.
Right.
It's basically Aleister Black and Kevin Owens and Samoa Joe versus AOP, Seth Rollins, Buddy Murphy. So you're going to see whatever different 1,000 incarnations that you're going to be able to see for the next 6 months. That's really what you're going to have.
And on top,
you were saying?
Joe got a concussion this past Monday. Did you see that hit he took?
Yeah. But on top of that, you look at SmackDown, and what's going on SmackDown? It's dog food with Roman Reigns and the Usos against Corbin and his crew. So, I mean, and how many different, like I said, incarnations can you see of this nonsense? It just goes on and on and on and on and on, and it's become so repetitive. But if you look back at WWE in the 80s and 90s, specifically New Generation, they were doing the same thing. But back then it was on the house show circuit, so nobody really cared as much. Where Bret Hart versus Shawn Michaels 17 days in a row somewhere. But unless you were in that city, you didn't care. That's the issue we're having right now, is that it's just constantly over and over and over again. Like, what's the main event going to be this week? Seth Rollins or Buddy Murphy or AOP, I mean. Got AOC in my mind. Versus, Joe or KO or Aleister Black or some incarnation of that. Like, how much money do you want to make a bet that the main event coming up at some point on Raw is going to be Aleister Black and either Samoa Joe or Kevin Owens for the tag titles against Murphy and Rollins?
Yep.
Like, tell me it's not going to happen the next 2 weeks.
And you know what's scary to me is that back in the 80s, you could have something like this, but because the connection to the audience and the storytelling was so much better, you didn't care if you saw it on a weekly. How many times did we see the Horsemen go against Sting, Luger, Dusty, things like that? But because the connection that the Horsemen had and the love that for Sting and the connection that he had to the audience, no one cared if you saw Sting and Flair over and over again. How many times did we see Sting and Flair? 1 billion? But nobody cared because of the connection. And this goes back to what we've been saying for week upon week upon week. The lack of connection to the audience makes this boring and repetitive. If they were connecting to the audience, I don't think anyone would have a problem seeing matches like this over and over again, because we saw it during Attitude. We saw it during the 80s, and it's just that right now in WWE, it's just there's no connection whatsoever. It's a complete disconnect from these characters.
But you know what? It's funny you say that, because if you think about it logically, Aleister Black and Buddy Murphy, they should be on Raw every single week having matches. Their matches are great. As a matter of fact, I'll go back to that. When RVD and Sabu had their feud at first, every week they were on ECW going at it. Mm-hmm. But nobody cared because every match was great. Jerry Lynn and RVD, how many matches did they have between ECW TV and pay-per-views? But nobody cared. Every match was great. Every match followed a similar formula, but you cared about the characters. Aleister Black and Buddy Murphy should have a long-running feud.
Especially now that they're pushing Buddy Murphy to be the top heel group. They could really do it.
I think Buddy Murphy is a good worker. I have no problem with Buddy Murphy. I think they're going to do shit with him.
Yep. It's going to end up being a situation where they're going to de-push him. He's going to lose, and then Seth's going to kick him out of the group, and they're all going to attack him, and then he's going to be on freaking main event.
So at this point now, our next big cards from both AEW's got the pay-per-view coming up.
Yep. They got the pay-per-view on Leap Day, Revolution, with Moxley against Jericho. I'm assuming Moxley's winning the title. I would think it's time.
And our next big event from WWE, I believe, is Saudi Arabia.
Yep, at the end of the month. And the only match that I know for sure that they've announced is New Day against Morrison and Miz for the tag titles.
Oofa.
What do you say? What do you think about Braun finally winning the Intercontinental title?
I think Braun is going to be your next incarnation of the Big Show. That's my take on him. I think the damage has been done. I just don't see what else you can do with him. I mean, you can't repackage him at this point. I think they pushed him too hard too soon. This IC title win should have happened probably 2 years ago, to be quite honest with you. I think 2 years ago, had this been done, I think you'd have a great character in your hands. Listen, the guy's big. He can move. He's not giving us horrible matches. But I just think they fucked up. They pushed him too hard too soon.
I got a better idea. How about the fact that him winning the Intercontinental title means nothing because the Intercontinental title is not what it used to be. And this is the whole point that we brought up to your brother. He was talking about a secondary title for AEW, but secondary titles don't mean anything.
Not in WWE, but I think, listen, look at NXT, the North American title. So if you do it right, it'll mean something. The North American title does fine. I just don't know if AEW is established enough yet to have a second championship. I'd say by this time next year, they should at least be looking into it.
I mean, I heard that Cody's talking about a trios title, but that doesn't help your singles guys.
Right, yeah. Like I said, I think by this time next year, we should be looking at another title in AEW, just because if done right, it can help. Like Keith Lee winning the North American title is going to raise his stock. He'll defend it for a while, and then build up and probably eventually become an NXT champion, unless Vince rushes him up, and then that's the end of that guy.
I would not be surprised if the night after WrestleMania, Keith Lee shows up on Raw and is there permanently.
I think it's a big mistake. That's a guy that should stay in NXT for as long as he can. He comes up on the main roster. I think he's going to do nothing. I think he'll just be another big guy like Braun who will look good for a couple of months and then wind up doing nothing.
Yep. So we got Saudi Arabia in February. We got Revolution in February. What did you think of AEW this week?
I think very standard. I think AEW is falling into not falling, but I think AEW has found their groove, so to speak. I feel like every show kind of, they give you good matches. They give you good, ring. I think overall it's a good show. I have no issues with a lot of the stuff they do. Like I said, I've always been maintained they're just starting out, got to give them time. But honestly, I feel like they've kind of hit their rhythm. They open up with something. They have their little middle area. They got their main event. I wouldn't mind seeing maybe a few more matches this week, but at this point, I'm pretty happy with what they're doing, and I like the fact they've kind of gotten into their groove.
I was actually surprised. They did a lot of promos this week.
Mm-hmm. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. They could have a couple more matches.
They opened with a promo, which they rarely ever do. They had a backstage promo with the Bucks, and then they had a couple of video promos, like with Pac and stuff. So I was actually surprised they went that route because they've been more about, just having the matches. And yeah, maybe, Jericho cut a promo and stuff. But, let me ask you, with AEW, do you think the fans singing along with Jericho songs is going to, take away from him being a heel? Or do you think it'll be just fine?
I think he's at the point now where, I don't know, how is that going to take away from him being a heel?
Well, you're the top heel in the company, and you have the entire arena singing your way to the ring.
Should we go through the list of heels that have been cheered in the history of wrestling?
You think he's gotten to a point that he's kind of like, not that he's like Flair, but as Ric Flair, as in the fact that no matter what Ric Flair did, whether he was a heel or a face, he was always cheered?
No, I think if you're always interesting, you're always going to be cheered. How does that sound to you at this point? I think the days of the classic heel and face are gone. I think if you have a character that fans can resonate with, you're going to get cheered. Randy Orton, look what he did. The fans weren't booing him, if you notice.
And Edge, I like the way Edge sold that. I like that his hand was shaking. Like people really thought. And what do you think of the way they did that with how Randy was kind of like questioning whether he should do this when he had his head in the chair? I mean, I think that's a big character thing, and I think that's going to be part of what's leading this story. And hopefully they don't hotshot it to Saudi Arabia. This is a story that should go to WrestleMania. But, with WWE, you never know what they're going to do. I would not be surprised if it ends up only happening in 3 weeks and then rushing it.
Right. Well, from what I'm understanding, Edge is good for 3 matches in his contract allegedly. I mean, that's what the dirt sheets say. Who knows what's true and what's not true? But I'm reading 3 matches.
No, if you go by what the dirt sheets say, he signed for 3 years, $3 million a year, 25 appearances, 5 matches a year.
All right. So if he goes for 5 matches, let's just say they back off with this until WrestleMania. That's 1 match.
Well, Royal Rumble would be 1, so this actually Mania would be 2.
The contract after Royal Rumble, though.
No, he signed months ago, actually. That's why he was downplaying it on social media. He even posted on Instagram him and his daughters having a tea party the weekend of WrestleMania to try to show he was in North Carolina and not in Houston.
So he does the 1 match at Royal Rumble, a 2nd match, let's say WrestleMania. So now we got 3 matches left for the year. So I'm thinking, obviously, he'll want the SummerSlam payoff. So that's 3 matches. I assume he'll want Survivor Series 4 matches. And let's just say him and Randy Orton finish their feud at Extreme Rules.
I would actually think that he would go. His fifth match would be the second Saudi show. That's in October. I think that's more of a big money, but than Extreme Rules. I mean, does Extreme Rules really matter? Like, seriously, what do you think about them?
I'm talking about the blow off of the match.
Okay. Well, I want to ask you, what do you think about WWE cutting back on pay-per-views? Do you think they got too much going on? And does that hurt their creative because they have to keep churning them out month after month?
I mean, they're running, 12 pay-per-views now since like 1995? I mean, you figure up to 24 years, they figure out how to make do.
It's actually they actually got 14 events. That's if you count Saudi, but we have a first, Avi, and I'd like to bring this up. We actually have a comment from a fan.
We do.
We do. I'm going to pull this up right now. He commented on our YouTube page, and he had I actually missed this last week, but this is for Romulus 3200, and I quote, "Love the cast. 2 questions. I would like to know if all the past Royal Rumbles, which do you think was the best? And if they remade it, I assume he means remade the greatest Royal Rumble match we think. If with the current WWE roster today, would it work?"
Historically, I find that people usually say the 92 Rumble was the best one. I mean, just from star power alone. I mean, just look who was in that match. I mean, you had Hogan, Undertaker, Flair, Savage, Piper, Snake. I mean, the list goes on and on of Hall of Famers in there. So if you're going by the best, usually 92 gets the nod as the best. You've had some good actual Rumble matches. I think, even though Vince tore his quad in that one, I believe it was the 05 one, I thought it was a pretty good Royal Rumble match, actually. My favorite Royal Rumble match of all time, I'm going to go with the 1990 Royal Rumble, where Hogan eliminates Perfect at the end. I thought that was a great Rumble. I thought the way Perfect went out at the end, I mean, how he didn't break his back right then and there is beyond me. My favorite Rumble is the 90. I think the best Rumble ever, I think, is a toss-up between 92 and probably 05.
I always liked 92. I always felt that was my favorite one. That's one I'm able to watch over and over again. But to answer the second part of his question, I don't think a situation like that Rumble would work because we saw something like that in 16 with Roman defending the title, and it wasn't that good of a Rumble.
I think if you had a Rumble now for a vacant title with the current roster, I think you could have a great Rumble. Because just think about it for a second. We saw Brock in the last Rumble. Now imagine the Fiend in a Rumble. I think if you vacated the title with the current roster, I think you could have a great Rumble. But here's the whole catch. You're not going to have MVP in there. You're not going to waste your time with John Morrison in there. You have to bring in your top guys. Braun's got to be in there. Rollins has to be in there. Murphy's got to be in there also. Like basically everyone you saw minus MVP and a couple of others would have to be in there. I think with this current roster, they could have a great Rumble, to be quite honest with you. I think they could.
Yeah, well, and then he gave us another comment, but I'm waiting to hear back from him because he commented on our cast from 2 weeks ago, and he only commented like an hour ago, and all he said was about Brian Pillman. But I'm not sure exactly what he means by Brian Pillman. He's like, Brian Pillman changed my mind.
All right. I mean, listen, guys, if you want us to do any kind of cast on any character you want, any pay-per-view you want, any show, any angle, hit us up. If you want us to do a Brian Pillman show, absolutely I can do a Brian Pillman show. Listen, I think Brian Pillman's probably, I would say historically, you could put him top 20 in-ring worker of all time. I think before he broke his ankle and the drugs and everything else affect him, you didn't see his best in WWE, that's for sure.
Yep.
But if you look at his stuff from WCW, his matches with Jushin Liger and everything else, I mean, the stuff we saw the cruiserweights do in WCW really was started with Brian Pillman. I think his character was phenomenal later on.
Yeah, it's a shame. Ever since that, once he got in that Humvee accident and really screwed his ankle up, we saw a shell of the man in WWE. And I think if he never got in that accident, the feud him and Austin could have had, stemming from the gun, could have been freaking something of legend.
The thing about Pillman is if you look at it, great worker, like I said, back in his WCW days. I think if you look at his WWE work, though, the one thing I can take away from that is that his character was phenomenal. You take that character that he had and throw it an attitude. And we've always said this. Me and you have always agreed. There were two characters, well, really three, that missed out on attitude. And I think had three of them been there, attitude could have gone a whole different way, which would have been phenomenal. The first, I've always said it, HBK. I mean, just the way things went down with The Rock and Austin and Triple H, I think HBK had his back not gone. I think DX could have been ridiculous during Attitude. The other two, and I've always said this, Brian Pillman, I think during Attitude could have been phenomenal. And the next one coming up, and I'm telling you now, people, come out, come fight me. I think a feud between him and Mankind during Attitude could have been phenomenal. Doink the Clown.
Doink the Clown was so ahead of his time.
If you would have taken an evil clown and put him in Attitude, imagine what kind of crap you could have came up with.
And it couldn't be Ray Apollo. It couldn't be Brooklyn Brawler. It would have to be freaking the original Doink.
Like, just imagine Russo, the shit that he could have came up with for freaking Doink back then.
Oh my! Honestly, people would have nightmares about clowns more than they are now.
I'm serious. They would have gone Stephen King. He would have been like an It type character. Yeah. They would have taken the character from It and brought it into wrestling. That's exactly what you would have seen.
All right, here's a good one for you. Here's a good question. Top 3 guys ahead of their time in wrestling.
Superstar Billy Graham, obviously. That's always been, without saying. I think Doink was way ahead of his time also. And another guy ahead of his time. That's a tough one. I mean, you always got to go Superstar Billy Graham. You always got to go Doink. Another guy that was way ahead of his time. Honestly, I mean, I don't know. That's a good one. How does it sound? To a degree, Jake Roberts. And I'll tell you why. Imagine Jake the Snake Roberts during Attitude.
The promos.
Yeah.
The promos if he was clean, imagine he was cleaned up like he is now during Attitude. Not even as a worker, but as a manager during Attitude.
Listen, I'll give you a better one. How about guys that in different federations in different times, how much better they could have been than they were? And I'll give you an example right here. The Hardy Boys in ECW instead of going to Attitude.
That is something that honestly would be freaking ridiculous. First off, I think we could agree Jeff Hardy would be dead or crippled.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine him and New Jack fighting off a balcony somewhere.
I'll give you another one. And this guy in ECW, imagine how different his career could have gone. Edge.
Edge had it in him to fit perfectly into ECW. We kind of saw it during the lead up to One Night Stand 06.
Oh, yeah. Listen, look at that match he had at WrestleMania against Mick Foley.
Yep.
It's probably one of the best WrestleMania matches ever. I'll give you another one. And this one actually got in my head recently. I was watching a thing on the screw job. And imagine Bret Hart in ECW at his peak.
If he went to ECW instead of WCW?
Yep.
What Paul Heyman would have done with him and the shit he would have given Vince. Can you imagine that platform of Bret Hart just going nuts?
Just something to think about.
I want to dedicate that. I think we're going to do a cast one day. I think I'm going to take some notes. I'm going to go do some research. I'm going to throw some names, and I'm going to throw names to who would be careers might be completely different if they traveled back in time into ECW. And I'm not talking WWE ECW. I'm talking Paul Heyman at at the freaking ECW arena at the Elks Lodge in Queens, New York, type ECW.
Listen, I'll give you a couple of guys. I mean, Randy Savage, I think would have been great in ECW. Jake the Snake Roberts, I think would have been great in ECW. I'll give you a guy who, it's going to shock you when I say this, but I think in ECW, I think he would have thrived. Crow Sting.
Yeah, I could have seen that.
I'm telling you that character could have gone different ways. I mean, there's so many characters you could think of. Listen, had Brian Pillman not gone to WWE and stayed in ECW, you know, I will give you a guy who would have been great in ECW. You ready? If he would have stayed there with his character from WWE in ECW, Eddie Guerrero.
Oh my God, he'd be so sleazy.
The Lion King, Eddie Guerrero.
You know who would have been great if he was able to work when he was there? Would have been freaky. If there would have been a good payoff, would have been Rick Rude. He was there for a cup of coffee. He was on commentary with the Mask. He was doing something with Shane, and they couldn't follow through because of his Lloyd's of London deal or whatever that might be. But if he would have been able to work, I think Rick Rude would have rechristened himself in ECW.
Listen, imagine Rick Rude during Attitude with Sable around. How that could have gone.
Yep.
You know, but I'll give you another guy who I think in ECW, the day he would have showed up, the roof would have came off whatever building he was in. Ric Flair in ECW.
Oh my! Can you just imagine the music plays when Ric Flair walks into the ECW arena? You'd either get massive cheer, like the roof would blow up from either freaking face, a pop, or he would get complete heel heat because of just that ECW Philly crowd that would give him such shit when Shane Douglas would bring him up.
I mean, the stuff that Ric Flair would say on the mic with Paul Heyman standing behind him. And it's interesting because you look at ECW back in the day behind Paul Heyman. And I mean, did that man just lose his Midas touch? Because if he's writing right now, he's writing absolute dog shit right now.
I mean, let's be real. It's 20 years later. He doesn't have the creative freedom, that he would have had. And, he's older. Maybe he doesn't have that, politically incorrect and damn proud of it attitude anymore. I mean, I'm going to say maybe Paul Heyman's gone corporate.
Speaking of which, you talked about Shane Douglas a few minutes ago. I watched this movie recently. It's called Wrestlers vs. Zombies. It's on this streaming network called Fawsome, Fawesome. And I'm going to bring up the cast right now in case anybody who's ever seen this movie, please hit me up because Ashley sat through it. And basically, it's about a bunch of wrestlers who, here it is, a 2013 film, but a bunch of wrestlers, they get stuck in an arena. And the reason they get stuck is this. The movie opens up with Shane Douglas killing a wrestler in the ring accidentally. And his older brother seeks revenge by making these zombies kill all the wrestlers. And here's the cast that's in this movie. Roddy Piper, Shane Douglas, Kurt Angle, Matt Hardy, Jim Duggan, Taya Parker, Rebby Sky, Matthew Rush are in this movie. And they basically have to fight their way out of an arena using wrestling moves to get away from the zombies. Yeah, Hacksaw Jim Duggan was there with his 2x4 to help out. This is the movie that actually, if any of our listeners have sat through this movie, you got to hit us up. We may have to do a podcast about this movie one day. It was that bad. It's on Fawsome, the streaming, thing. Go watch it. Get back to us. This movie is that bad. They must have had some sort of a budget because think about who the wrestlers are. They can afford all these people. And they were in character the entire movie, by the way. Yeah. Like, Shane Douglas was referring to himself in third person as the franchise the entire movie.
How did no one sue anyone? I guess it's one of those...
It was that bad. It was that bad.
I wanted to touch on one last thing before we wrap this up, and it's something you mentioned earlier about managers in wrestling. To me, it's a lost art form, and I think guys who aren't doing much in their careers could really benefit from it. I mean, look at Nakamura and Cesaro.
Baron Corbin.
Yeah, but look at Sami Zayn. He is awesome in that role as their freaking mouthpiece.
Yeah.
I mean, you got a guy like Drake Maverick, who we know can be that great annoying manager. Showed it when he was Rockstar Spud. I mean, he's a guy who could really, given the right guy, could really work something good. But I think there's a lot of guys out there, like you said, Baron Corbin. I think instead of him being in the ring, he should take a break in the ring, and he should manage Roode and Ziggler.
I would agree with that.
I mean,
I think you're at a point though where, I mean, valets obviously still have a place in wrestling. You know, Zelina Vega's doing a great job, but do managers really still have a place in wrestling?
I mean, it depends how they're used. I think that since the new year that Arn Anderson has been great in his role as the coach for Cody. So I think depending on how they're portrayed and how they're used, it could work.
I could see that, yeah.
I mean, I think they dropped the ball with the way they used Tully in AEW, and I think it's because they put him with Shawn Spears, who they never really, once he got past that one match with Cody, there really wasn't going to go anywhere else. But right. I think given the right person, like, what if you have Tully all of a sudden take up with MJF? Now that he's in this deal with Cody, who has Arn. I mean,
here's the thing. We talk about how, is our manager, is there anybody out there that's capable of really playing a manager? Because think about it. Look at the old days, the Bobby Heenans, the Freddie Blassies, the James J. Dillons, even Slick and guys like that. That's an art form. Jimmy Hart, another one. That's an art form, playing a manager. We have to wonder, do guys still have that part of them? Jimmy Hart, Bobby Heenan, those guys were taking bumps. Those guys were outside the ring being annoying, but they knew how to get guys over. That's the thing also. Remember, managers were used back then to get guys over. Andre could have turned on Hogan. Would have been a heel. As soon as he showed up at Bobby Heenan, he became a heel. That's different. He didn't lay a finger on Hulk Hogan. He simply challenged Hulk Hogan with Bobby Heenan staying next to him, and right then and there became the biggest heel in the business.
And that's a testament to Bobby Heenan on how over as a heel he was.
But even, think about it, even with Jimmy Hart, I remember when Earthquake came in and he sat on Ultimate Warrior's back. Let him sit on Ultimate Warrior's back and don't give him Jimmy Hart. This guy's not getting over. You give him Jimmy Hart, now he's the biggest heel in the company. And a year later, he's main eventing SummerSlam against Hulk Hogan.
Yep.
So you got to look at it in that respect, is that we say the day of the manager is dead, but how many guys out there can truly play a manager? There's an art form to being a manager in the sense where you're going to take a guy who's a face or maybe has nothing going on, and the second he associates himself with you is now over. That's being a manager. That's what Bobby Heenan did. That's what James J. Dillon did. That's what Slick did. That's what Jimmy Hart did. Those guys, as soon as they touched you, you became a heel.
Is that something that is natural, or do you think that could be taught? Like, if Jimmy Hart took Robert Stone, the former Robbie E. from TNA, who's now a manager in NXT, do you think if he took him under his wing and taught him certain things, that is something that could be passed down, or is it just something that's so natural it just can't be taught?
I'm going to say it's a little bit of both, but I'm going to say more natural. I'll tell you why. There's a guy right now in wrestling who can be the biggest manager in the business right now if they do it the right way, and they're starting to do it the right way. Orange Cassidy. He can be the biggest manager in the business because he has it. He has what is needed to be a great manager. The crowd cares about him. The crowd watches him. The crowd acknowledges him. Zelina Vega gets the same thing. For what Zelina Vega knows what she's doing, she's a great manager. She kind of reminds me of Sensational Sherry, to be honest with you, in a lot of ways. I think to be a manager, it's one of those things like being a wrestler. It's just an it factor. But by the same token, there are definitely things you can be shown. Bobby Heenan got better as time went on. You know, is he the standard bearer of wrestlers? I mean, you got to look at him. You got to look at Jimmy Hart. James J. Dillon's the one that comes to mind. Trying to think other great managers that come to mind.
What about a little more old school? Grand Wizard?
Yes and no, it was different back then. I'll give you a great manager. Doesn't get nearly the props he deserves. Bill Alfonso. Back at his peak in ECW, if you looked at you, you were a heel.
Let's get something right. Let's straight. RVD would never have gotten over as a heel if it wasn't for Alfonso. Taz, with his new character when he came in 95, would not have had the same impact if he didn't help Alfonso and Alfonso be his manager.
Absolutely. Nobody would have given a shot at Taz. People don't realize until Taz turned heel and got with Bill Alfonso, nobody gave a shit about him. It was Tasmaniac. He was a little midget that walks around with a funny outfit pretending to be Tasmanian Devil. Calls himself Taz, gets a new haircut, and winds up getting with Bill Alfonso, becomes the biggest heel in the business.
And then when Taz was big enough that he didn't need Alfonso anymore, Alfonso helped Sabu and RVD get over.
I'll give you an important manager in wrestling history. One of the most important, one of the most overlooked managers in wrestling history, Paul Bearer.
Oh, yes.
At the beginning of Undertaker's career, you take Paul Bearer away from him, it is not working out. He could not carry a promo to save his life. Paul Bearer, listen to me, I'd say from 91, about halfway through, I know it was Brother Love at first, then it became Paul Bearer about halfway through 91. From 91, I want to say through 97, if it weren't for Paul Bearer, you would not see Undertaker, I'm telling you right now. There's no way he gets as big as he does without Paul Bearer. Paul Bearer, if you watch his old interviews from, between WrestleMania and SummerSlam, those old ones, I'd say you look at any old Undertaker interview from 91 through 96, 97, you put Undertaker speaking, he's not getting over. And if you think about Paul Bearer did not interfere that often in matches.
Nope, he didn't have to.
But when it came to the mic stuff, take away Paul Bearer, your Undertaker's done.
Oh, yeah. Because first off, I mean, could Taker have cut a good promo back in 91, 92 if given the chance?
Hell no.
Maybe. Not back then.
No way.
He learned it. He learned it when he became the American Badass. He got better with it. But with that character, there's no way. And you know what? There was only so much mileage with Brother Love as his manager. And I know Bruce said he didn't want to be on the road all the time. What was it? Is that what he said, right? He didn't want to be on the road or... But
straight and Brother Love, they don't want to be on the road all the time. Listen, it worked out for everybody. But I'm telling you right now, Paul Bearer, and go ahead, fight me on it, our fans, probably the most important man. I'd say second most important manager in wrestling history. Number one, I got to go Bobby Heenan. Andre the Giant turned into the biggest heel, like I said before, on the planet by simply aligning himself with Bobby Heenan. If Bobby Heenan wouldn't have walked out with Andre the Giant for that challenge, I don't think he becomes the heel he becomes.
And the freaking whole program wouldn't have been as big as it was for 2 years. For 3 years, I'm sorry.
Well, even before that, you go back to WrestleMania 2, was King Kong Bundy, a Bobby Heenan guy against Hulk Hogan.
If anything, I think everyone doesn't give Bobby the credit. If anything, I think the biggest feud in the 80s might have been the Heenan family against Hulk Hogan.
Absolutely. Between King Kong Bundy, Andre the Giant,
Stud,
Rick Rude, who else was there? Harley Race. Who else did he manage that went against him? I'm sure there's a few other guys.
Haku
was another one. Yeah, I mean, between all those guys alone, that was the Heenan family.
And obviously, without Bobby Heenan, none of that would have mattered. And
I'll give you another manager that was really important to the 80s as far as Hulk Hogan went. Slick, Boss Man, One Man Gang, Kamala. Managers are just as important as wrestlers we've seen. And right now, you're at a point where, suffice to say, there's no real managers out there. Listen, Yokozuna, take Fuji out of his corner.
Nothing.
You're not going to get diddly shit. And I'll tell you what added to him was when Cornette joined up with him. How many guys would never have done shit if it weren't for them having a manager? Think about it.
Midnight Express wouldn't be as over if it
No.
wasn't for James. I mean, imagine just that the whole beginning. Led to Stanley doing the promo for announcing Jim Cornette. That package was ridiculous.
Listen, Road Warriors without Paul Ellering.
Yep.
They're not getting as over as they were. I'll give you another one. You know, as great as Ric Flair was, you take away James J. Dillon of the Horsemen, he's nowhere near where he was.
Right.
But I'll give you another one. One of the most important managers in the history of the business. And without this person, this other person goes nowhere near the top of the wrestling business. Elizabeth.
Oh, yeah, of course.
You take Elizabeth away from Randy Savage, there is no Randy Savage. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that.
And she didn't even do anything. She literally just stood there. That's it.
I'll say this. At the beginning, I'd say the first couple of months, she would distract the referee every now and then by talking to the referee. But there was never any physical distraction, obviously. Her distraction was completely just talking to the referee every now and then. And I'd say that only happened in a handful of matches. I remember against Tito Santana, she did it in a couple of the matches. You take Elizabeth away from Randy Savage does not become the crossover star that he became. It's just not happening. Simple as that.
Agreed. And you know what? Now that you say it, I don't think there's anyone who can get to that level in WWE.
Listen, Sergeant Slaughter even turns against America, becomes the Iraqi sympathizer, take Adnan out of his corner. I don't think it's as big.
Nope. Especially it helped that Adnan had that mustache.
You know,
a resemblance to somebody.
Listen, I'll give you another one. When Owen and Bulldog had a manager.
Cornette.
Yep. You take Cornette away from Owen and Bulldog, they don't get as far as they did. You know, so there's a lot of guys. Listen, I'll give you a handful of guys that probably would never have gotten as far as they did without this one man, the Dangerous Alliance.
Oh, Paul Lee was ridiculous.
If you look at WCW back then, you take Paul Lee away from Rick Rude, that ain't Rick Rude.
Right.
Steve Austin does not become Steve Austin. You know, Arn Anderson at that point is a lost soul of the Dangerous Alliance. Bobby, same thing. Larry Zbyszko, same thing. The Dangerous Alliance, for what it's worth, was pretty much your biggest thing in WCW 92, and rightfully so. It was a great, angle, great feud. Take away Paulie Dangerously and get those guys go separate, you're not getting shit out of them.
I wish that would have lasted longer with the Dangerous Alliance. I wish it was more of, a permanent thing than so much an angle.
Yeah, I know. I've always said that. It was one of the great stables of all time.
Yep. Just
all the characters, the way it was. I mean, you had Rick Rude with Steve Austin, with Arn Anderson, with Bobby Eaton, with Larry Zbyszko. I mean, you had such great workers in that. And the feud was great. They feuded with Sting, Barry Windham, Dustin Rhodes, Nikita Koloff, and who was the other one they feuded with?
Ricky Steamboat. That was the War Games.
Yep. That was such a great feud altogether.
And that was a good War Games, too. That's an underrated War Games in 92.
It's probably your second and third best War Games, to be quite honest with you. Interesting, by the way, I was listening to the Royal Rumble 95, something to wrestle with Conrad and Bruce. And Bruce brought up an interesting point I never realized. The 93 Royal Rumble, his choice to win it that he proposed to Vince McMahon, which Vince eventually turned down. Do you know who it was?
No clue.
Gets even better. Besides the fact he actually said he wanted this guy to win the Rumble, he wanted him to win the world title at WrestleMania from Bret Hart. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Just take a stab at it. I was shocked when I heard this. And you know me, I know a lot. I did not know about this.
I have no clue where. I don't even know. I can't even venture a guess right now.
So the word is for Survivor Series 93, Vince wanted to go with Yoko for a couple of months, the big guy against Bret Hart, and take it to that next big heel. Pat and company, some of the other people that were in the inner circle, were actually pushing for Randy Savage to win, and so was Bret Hart, pushing for Randy Savage to win the Rumble and have a classic, 25, 30-minute match with Bret Hart, which would then make Bret Hart your official leader of the, almost like a passing of the torch. From your golden era, Randy Savage, to Bret Hart, and going from there. This is before Hulk Hogan even came in the picture, by the way, again. So they were wrestling, no pun intended, back and forth between Randy Savage and Yokozuna. And Vince was adamant about Yokozuna. A last-ditch effort was brought upon by Bruce Pritchard and Pat Patterson to have this guy go to WrestleMania and win the belt, win the Royal Rumble and win the belt, because they felt he had the look that Vince McMahon loved, specifically from his face champions. Are you ready?
I'm ready. I'm trying to think who.
Scott Steiner.
Really?
Bruce Pritchard pushed and pried and prodded, trying to get Scott Steiner to win the Rumble and win the belt at WrestleMania as your leader of the new generation because he figured Vince loved the guy, that look. And Vince, for about a second, actually gave it some serious thought, from what I understand from Bruce was saying. Sat there, thought it over, and then said, okay, so when Yokozuna wins the Rumble, here's what we're going to do next. That was his actual answer.
Well, and let's not forget, we're not talking Big Papa Pump Scott Steiner. We're talking Michigan mullet Steiner brothers Scott Steiner.
Right, and the reason why Bruce Pritchard got that idea, A, he had the big look and the big arms and everything else, but B, keep in mind, before they left to WWE, WWF back then, he did win the TV title on WCW, if you remember.
Yep, right before he left.
Yep, and beat Ricky Steamboat in a very technical match. So I've always said, if I was going to do WrestleMania 9 over again, I would have gone with Savage and Hart, give him a 20, 30-minute classic battle, let Hart win. Hart becomes the leader of the new generation. Everyone lives happily ever after. Because let's be honest, Yokozuna was a good heel champion. The way he beat Bret Hart, that was just atrocious. Like, even Bret Hart couldn't carry something like that. But imagine if Scott Steiner in 93 would have won the world title at WrestleMania 9. How different wrestling could have been.
That what ifs, a lot of what ifs. I think next week we're going to do that. I think we're going to play what if next week.
I mean, there's so many. I mean, listen, you can go with the what if, where what if Hogan backs out of a WWF contract at the last second in 1983 and decides to stay with Vern?
What if Vince doesn't screw Bret in 97 and actually trust him to do the right thing?
Yeah, I mean, listen, there's a lot to think about. You know, people don't realize that Hogan was slated to win the AWA World title in a cage match in November of 83. He left in November of 83. He was slated to win the world title in a cage match against Nick Bockwinkel.
Man, there's so many things out there that could be. It's insane.
Listen, one of the greatest what-ifs ever, and I mean, listen, he was using Vince, obviously, to gain leverage with Eric Bischoff. What if in 98, Hogan left WCW and came to WWE right in the middle of Attitude, and at WrestleMania 15, your main event is Austin against Hogan?
And that was Hogan at the top of his heel game as Hollywood Hogan. Austin, white hot as anything. That would have been just insane money.
I mean, imagine your reaction. The guy who used to go out of the house dressed like Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Here we go. One time.
Tell our fans about it.
Well, it was one time I went out. I just happened to, it was warm out. I wore shorts, and I happened to have an Austin 316 shirt, and I just happened to have black boots, but my head wasn't shaved, and I didn't have a goatee. So you know what? I don't want to hear it.
You walked around in a Austin 316 shirt, denim jorts, and black boots.
It was the look of the 90s. Stand by it. It was the look of the 90s.
Would you ever do it again?
No.
I think for a WrestleMania broadcast, you got to dress like Stone Cold Steve Austin that day.
Okay. So I gotta order an Austin 316 shirt from WWEshop.com. Obviously, getting the jean shorts is no problem. I'm sure I have black boots somewhere. I'll do that. I'm not shaving my head, I'll tell you that much, but I'll dress up for the podcast WrestleMania weekend for our 1-year anniversary. I'll do it.
All right, people, if you have any questions, you want any special shows, throw the requests our way. We do not shy away from requests.
WillYouStopPodcast.com. It is your one-stop shop for everything us. Hit us up on all our social media that way, on Twitter, Instagram. Definitely subscribe on our YouTube channel. This is where this will be. You can also listen to the show on Spotify if you are in the car and you can't watch the video and you just want to listen. And we're going to keep working, and we're going to keep posting, and we're going to keep rolling with this. And we want you to follow us, and we want you to spread the word. Yeah, I'm hoping in 2020 we can make this the biggest podcast out there.
I think we will. Thank you for listening, guys. Until next time.
Have a good one, guys.